Welcome to Postcall Beyond the White Coat, the podcast where we explore how doctors are impacting healthcare differently. I'm Dr. Selena, your host and co founder of Disruptive Doctors. Before we dive in, let me share a quick story. Actually, after I left clinical medicine, I ventured into medical research. Strangely, it was a very lonely transition and found myself in an office where no one talked to each other. And I was spending most of my time in solitude, not knowing what to do with the skill and knowledge that I've acquired. So I'm actually very happy that I found Dr. Mindy today to share her experience. See, as doctors, we've been trained and also told by society that our only value in the hospitals and clinics where we are seeing patients. But as I've gone along this journey, I realized that that is not true. There's so much more we can do as doctors. Now, in Post Call, we'll dive into stories of doctors who are breaking the mold. Whether they've ventured into non clinical areas of healthcare, launch an innovative project, or champion new causes. Now, these trailblazers are redefining what it really means to be a doctor. Disruptive Doctors, we're building a platform to help doctors like you impact healthcare differently. So join the movement and sign up to our website to connect with a community of forward thinking doctors who are impacting healthcare differently. Now, in today's episode, I'm excited to introduce Dr. Myndy Dee, dedicated clinical trial unit head of Subang Jaya Medical Centre. Now, what drives a dedicated doctor to transition into clinical research? Now, Dr. Mindy's journey is a story of resilience, passion, and commitment to making a difference in healthcare. So, if you're ready, be inspired by your peers who are leading the change in impacting healthcare differently, stick around. This is Post Call Beyond the White Coat. Hi, Dr. Mindy. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm so thankful that you invited me, and actually, this is my first time doing a podcast. Yeah.
Well, we're excited to have you as well. I know I've already introduced you. Maybe you want to
Mhm.
do like a very brief introduction to our audience about yourself and what it is that you do right now.
Yep. Okay, so my name is Mindy, and I'm currently working as the clinical trial unit head at Subang Jaya Medical Centre. And obviously, I'm in clinical research right now. But I was working in KKM for the past 10 years before that. And I look forward to talking to you all about this. Yep.
Okay, thanks, Mindy. So I always ask my guests, what drew them initially to a career in medicine?
I mean, as cliche as it sounds like, right? I think I was interested in a career choice that was stable and also able to contribute to helping other people. I know it sounds really cliche, but that is really my reason. Yeah.
So you mentioned you were working in KKM. Tell us where were you and
Mhm.
how was it like?
Okay. So I was in KKM for a total of 10 years. So I did my housemanship, and then after that I was sent to Sabah. My first MO posting in Sabah, so it was in Sandakan. And I think it was an amazing experience now working in Sabah. I was lucky to have a really great team of colleagues and bosses. To my bosses, I think they know who they are. And also, I have such great admiration and respect for all of our specialists because they were able to achieve so much for their patients, despite occasionally limited resources. I was also really thankful because in that department, we had a really good team of medical officers as well working together. During my first few on calls, I mean, it was really felt really anxious during my first few on calls, but all of my colleagues were very supportive. Lah. So after my time in Sabah, then I got my transfer back to the Klang Valley, and I was in the genetics department for 2 years. And after that, I moved to the National Institutes of Health for 5 years.
Okay, can you tell us about the accident? Can you take us back to what happened and how did that impact you?
So, referring to the accident, right, even though it happened 9 years ago, I actually remember it just like it was yesterday. Lah. So, I was assigned to escort a patient via ambulance to Kota Kinabalu. This, of course, happened during my time as an MO in Sabah. Less than an hour out of Sandakan itself, the ambulance met with an accident, and without going into too many details, right, because There have been numerous investigations by KKM already into this thing. So suffice it to say that it was a major accident in which the patient actually passed away, and I sustained two major fractures. So we had other escorting staff as well, which who also sustained minor fractures lah. Yeah.
How was that? How did that impact you after that?
Well, in the immediate aftermath, honestly, I felt more emotionally numb. Like in the first few days, I really wasn't able to fully process and work through the trauma and survivor's guilt until much later, actually. Until today, I think I remember the patient's name. I'll never forget it, you know. So looking back on it now, this accident actually forced me to take what I would call a much needed pause and reevaluation of my priorities lah. So what I knew I wanted in my career was to still have a chance to do some good and impactful work for patients, but at the same time, right, I also couldn't bring myself to get into an ambulance voluntarily again. So that's when I decided lah, when I didn't have a choice but to pursue a non-clinical career pathway. Because if I continued being a clinical MO, right, there's no way I can say I refuse to escort a patient, correct or not? If I'm assigned to do that, if it's my job, if I'm on call, there's no way I can refuse to do it. So it took me a little while to reach that decision, but yeah, but that was my main reason, and also I knew that I wanted more freedom to spend time with loved ones and pursue my other interests and hobbies.
How you say it took you some time? Can you do you mind telling us like how did you process the whole thing? What went through your head, and how did you decide that okay, this is it, and moving on?
Yeah, it definitely was not an easy decision lah. I think I went back and forth in my mind during the long MC. I was on long MC for about 6 months after that. Yeah. Uh, so I had all these questions in my mind, you know, about whether it was truly worth it to continue. But I was very lucky in the sense that I had such supportive bosses in Sandakan and also a supportive family. So I had the space that I needed to just reflect and think about what I truly wanted in life lah. Yeah.
That must have been quite tough. A good thing that you had supportive family, but
Yeah.
other than that, that was you're pretty much on your own trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah. Um, I think, you know, it was definitely a very tough time. This is the first time I'm speaking, I think, on record regarding this. I've definitely spoken about it to friends and family. Yeah, but it was a very tough time. You know, the five stages of grief that you know that is often talked about. I think I went through all of that. It's really taken a while, lah. Yeah, but as I said, thankfully, I had my family, I had my friends, and I made it through because of them. There were really, really tough days, lah, you know, but yeah. And when I got back into work, it was a real challenge to get back into the rhythm of it because I was also dealing with the complication of a delayed fracture healing. Yeah. But again, thankfully, as I got back to work in Sandakan, you know, my bosses were so supportive. And I must say this, you know, ironically, after I got my transfer back to the Klang Valley, one of the things I realized was that our fellow medical professionals are often the ones who judge each other the most harshly. I really don't wish to delve too deeply into it, lah, but suffice it to say that a little empathy would have been nice at that time. Yeah.
I think I know what you're
Yeah.
saying, you're talking about, because I've been on both sides
Yeah.
of that situation where I'm ashamed to say that I've been that person who judged, and I've also been that person who was judged. So
Mm.
I know what how difficult it can be being on
Yeah.
both sides, because we're judging because we're all overworked.
Yeah.
And so when you see somebody else who's not doing any more on calls because they are injured, you kind of secretly envy them.
Yeah, it's like a systemic. It's like a systemic issue that causes all of this, right? The overwork, and now the resources and all of these things.
Yeah. So, can you tell us a bit about your transition? You mentioned you ended up in genetics, is it, when you transferred back to Klang Valley?
Yeah. So I was in genetics for 2 years at HKL, and I think it was a sort of really nice experience. I got to see such a different set of patients, and till today, I do keep in touch with some of the patients, and they were the. I really had some good times there, lah. Yeah. So during my time in genetics, I realized that I want to transition of clinical work. And so that's when I decided to pursue a master's in health research. So that took me 2 years because I studied part time. And after that, I then transferred to the National Institutes of Health, where I was working with the Medical Research and Ethics Committee for 5 years.
Okay, I remember when I transitioned into medical
Mm.
research, I felt a lot of the time I was very isolated, was mostly in silence. I don't have anybody to talk to. What was your experience like when you transitioned?
I think I had much of the similar experience, because when we first transitioned, I think all of our friends are still in clinical work. So suddenly it's a completely different lingo, right? I recall feeling lost with all the new terminology, all the new acronyms, like what are these things? So it was quite an adjustment, just diving into this completely new world with its own language and pace. Yeah.
Okay, what were the struggles you faced like when you were doing this? I mean, when you were going through this, like you said, you had no one else to talk to because most of your friends are still in clinical.
Hmm. Well, first, of course, there were a lot of, I would say, comments or a little bit of pushback from many people around me. A lot of people ask, so you don't want to see patients anymore? Or, oh, what a waste. You studied for so long already. Then now you don't want to treat patients, right? So I'm sure every doctor who transitioned out of clinical work actually faced these questions, right? Was this the case for you as well?
Yeah, I think a lot of family. Yeah,
Mm,
I hated to go back for family reunions because they'll be
yeah.
asking, "Oh, you're a doctor, but you're not seeing patient. What are you doing?"
Yeah, exactly. So when facing all of these questions, it's a little bit hard to explain sometimes. I do clinical research, I do this, and when I was working in the ethics committee, in fact, sometimes I didn't know how to explain until at some point, if I'm not mistaken, I just told somebody, oh, we are a little bit like the police, of clinical research in that sense. Yeah. So I think that was one of the foremost challenges lah, with going into non-clinical, because the knowledge and the terminology can be learned. And if we just search online, there are just so many resources for that, but it's the people around us that and all these comments that can affect us really. Yeah.
Okay, earlier you mentioned you took up this masters in research. Can you explain a little bit more, like for the readers who are interested in going down that path? Like, what is this masters in research?
Okay, so this is a master's in health research, and I did it in Penang at that time. So now it's called the RCSI UCD campus, right? So it was a 2 year long master's, and I paid for it myself. I didn't get any KKM funding, and it was a part time course. So I would say that it really provided a good foundation for me in clinical research, because they taught us everything from research methodology to how to calculate your sample size, and of course, how to write a full master's thesis, right?
I was, I actually was looking for something like that while I was there because
Mm,
when I went to medical research, there was not much guidance. I didn't even know where to look for resources and all that. I think if I met you back then or if I knew about this, I probably would be going down that path as well.
mm. Yeah, and I'm wondering, did our times at intersect in NIH or something like that?
I'm not sure. I was in NIH around 2017 or 2018 to 2020.
Ah, Oh, yeah, then our times definitely did intersect.
All right. So, as a clinical
Yeah.
trial unit head in Subang Jaya,
Mm,
what is your primary responsibility there?
okay. So I would say that where I work currently, the equivalent in KKM is the CRC, the Clinical Research Center. So I think CRCs now are quite well known already, and in a sense, I say that we would fulfill many of the same functions. So in my current role, I oversee operational aspects and the execution of industry-sponsored and investigator-initiated research at our hospital, making sure that it complies with all the ethics committee requirements, Malaysian Good Clinical Practice requirements, ICH GCP standards as well. So a lot of it involves research project management. It's planning and delivery, including feasibility studies, site qualification, site startup activities, budget negotiation, resource and contract management, site interim monitoring, data cleaning, and also site study closeout. Yeah.
How does this combine with how do you combine your medical expertise and your clinical experience with this?
Mm. So, as doctors, right, we know what a certain condition needs. So, in that sense, it helps in planning for resources. It helps us in explaining to the sponsor what is the why do we need these standard treatments, the cost of this covered for our patients, what are the devices, what are the other procedures that would be needed. Yeah. So, in a sense, we're in a unique position to provide information on this.
Okay, do you still see patients in this clinical trial department?
Okay, so I'm not the main treating doctor for them, but we do still interact quite a lot with our trial patients, especially when they come in for their screening activities, for their usual study visits. We do still have quite a lot of interaction with them.
Okay, how does you being in clinical trial, how do you think you are impacting healthcare differently?
I think I'm not in direct clinical work, but we can still make a difference in clinical trials because clinical trials offer our patients access to many of these new medications that they otherwise would maybe not be able to have access to yet. Of course, not all new drugs work, yeah. This is a caveat that I have to put out there, but in many cases, we do see our clinical trial patients doing well, and that's really I think that's really the best part of working in clinical research.
Tell me more about it. Like you just mentioned that this is the best part in working in clinical research. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so throughout my career, I actually enjoy having this interaction with patients. Like even till today, I keep in touch with some of the patients from genetics. So being able to have these same interactions and to sort of build rapport with patients is very important for me. So when we see sometimes the results of these trial patients, oh, they're doing well. That is like when my study coordinators share the results with me. I think that is something that really brings a smile to all of our faces lah. Because there are really tough days in clinical research. There are days when it's just like, oh, okay, you have to problem solve all of these things. But I think these the days when we see this, it makes it worth it. Yeah.
Why do you think clinical research is important and why do you think doctors should go into it?
Hmm. Well, I would say that research in general is actually important in many industries, right? Not just healthcare. But research, I guess, is not for everyone. Medicine has come a long way, right? From the days when surgery was done without anesthesia. But imagine, if you will, a vehicle, right? So this vehicle, it represents medical progress where we're always moving forward and always trying to improve the care that we provide to our patients. Research is the fuel or the petrol that keeps this vehicle moving. It's the backbone behind our innovations that we implement in patient care. And why should doctors go into research? If they like it, if they're passionate about it, and if they, truly want to drive medical progress forward, then I think they should go into research. Yeah, but again, there's nothing wrong with not doing research because everyone's interests lie in a different area, right?
You know what you mentioned, research is not for everyone.
Yeah.
I remember a senior researcher mentioned this to me when I first joined IMR, and I was just wondering, what does she mean by that? And it's only when I went through like 2 years, 3 years in the medical research facility,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I realized, yes, not everyone is suited for research. You need a
Yeah.
certain characteristic trait in you to really succeed in research. So, what do you think? What kind of person is suitable for research?
Mm. Okay, so I would say someone who has a lot of general curiosity about why things are the way they are, someone who wants to sort of challenge the status quo, and someone who is just inquisitive, curious, and detail oriented. So sometimes in research, especially in documentation, um, good documentation practice is, of course, very, very important. So we have to be really, really, really detailed in what we write, how we write it, how many copies of each document to keep, where these documents are stored. One of the very painful parts is the maintenance of the investigator site file, where we have to ensure that we really have that trail of documentation that is auditable. So in this sense, I guess someone who doesn't like to delve into the tiny, tiny details, probably research may not be suitable. Yeah.
I guess you have to be honest with yourself,
Mm-mm.
right? Until I met you, I always thought, I mean, the kind of doctors that I met who go into research, they're all in government practice. And previously, I was told that there's really no career path in research for doctors unless you're in government. But you seem
Mm-hmm.
to have proved it otherwise. So, if doctors who are not in a government practice but they want to get into research, what can they do?
Okay. Well, actually, I must say that I'm not the only doctor in research, and there are so many other giants of research, I would say. Yeah. I feel like, in fact, I am only a very, very small cog in the wheel of research. Like during the conference the other day, Prof. Lokman, Dr. Woon, Dr. Mahadevan, they are truly the giants in research. Yeah. So I think they have also proved that there is a career pathway for doctors in research. But of course, right, thinking about the general clinical research industry, um, as doctors, we are not only competing with fellow doctors to be in the industry, but remember that a lot of the science graduates, right, biomedical science, biotech, they are also competing for the same jobs in research. So we have to really equip ourselves with the skills in order to be able to excel in this field.
So, like, where can they find this kind of jobs? If, say, doctor who has never gone into research but is interested, and now there's very limited space in our government hospitals for doctors
Mm.
venturing anywhere, right? So, what can they do?
Okay, so if they are still in government service, right, my first suggestion would be to actually get their feet wet in research first, just within their department. All government departments do a lot of clinical audits, a lot of retrospective research, right? So that I think would be the first place to start in order to also build their resume and build their skills in research. I would really not suggest anyone just drastically jumping out into research without having any experience first. Yeah. So after gaining a little bit of experience in that, there are quite a few pathways I think to look at. Yeah. So just within the clinical trial industry itself, we have CRO companies, clinical research organizations, that offer entry level jobs such as study coordinators. If they have more experience or once they have been involved in more clinical trials, then they can progress to the clinical research associate, and there are multiple levels of that. So they can start at CRA one, then CRA two, and maybe a senior CRA. And after that, beyond that, there's clinical trial manager, there's clinical operations manager. So there are a lot of these options in the private sector as well. It's just that we need to compete with people who are not doctors as well. So we must ensure that, again, we have all the skills needed.
Well, that's very insightful because,
Yeah.
like I said, it's the information on how to get into clinical research is very very limited. As you were previously in medical ethics committee,
Yes.
maybe could you briefly tell our audience what is medical ethics and what is it that you guys do there?
Okay, so I worked at MREC, right, the Medical Research and Ethics Committee, and in KKM, this is sort of the central ethics committee. So we actually have to review research applications from all KKM sites in Malaysia. Well, research ethics is basically just about a few principles, right? So I think the first principle is autonomy. Autonomy is respecting the wishes of an individual and giving them the power to decide on whether or not to participate in research. The second is, of course, beneficence, and the third is justice. What this means is that several core principles, such as giving informed consent or obtaining informed consent, ensuring patient safety and data privacy, these principles continue to be foundational. Nowadays, there are emerging ethics challenges such as equitable participant selection. So in a global clinical trial, how do we ensure that the patients, like a participant in Malaysia, has equal access to clinical trials with patients in other countries? How do we ensure that? How do we balance commercial interests with patient welfare? And also navigating the use of AI in research. So I think there are a lot of new ethical questions relating to the use of AI. And recently, in fact, I saw that this research handbook on AI, health AI and the law was recently released. And I haven't gone through it all, but it looks really interesting.
Could maybe for our audience who would be interested, Mindy, maybe you could tell them what's the book and where they can find it.
So one of the authors was Prof. Barry Sulaiman. You can download it from Alger online. The full book is available to download. So some of the chapters, right, include things such as AI in hospital administration and management, ethical and legal implications, AI and data protection law in health. So all of these are really, really interesting topics to delve into.
Well, thanks, Mindy. I think you've given us quite a lot of information. So, reflecting on your journey, what are you most proud on in your career?
I think, honestly, for persevering, for sticking with it through all the challenges and self-doubt. It certainly hasn't been an easy journey, but I think I've tried my best at every stage of the way, and I've tried to acquire and build the necessary skills in clinical research, and I'm also constantly trying to improve. So I think that's something that I am most proud of. Yeah.
Okay, so for doctors who are considering a non-clinical career path, especially
Yeah.
maybe in clinical medicine, like what would your advice be?
Mm. So I think my first take-home message is to first be very sure of what you want before transitioning into clinical research. And second, of course, persevere, persevere, persevere. Don't give up. The career path isn't necessarily straightforward, but there is a path forward. And the good thing is that we can always prepare and equip ourselves before taking the leap out of clinical work. Yeah. So again, if you're still working in a clinical field and you wish to gain more experience in clinical research, most likely you need to volunteer. You need to take on more work. You need to help out in your department research, or just join the CRC first. Yeah.
I think that's the
Yeah.
dreadful words that you've just mentioned. Take on more work.
Yes. Unfortunately, right, I think to be able to transition successfully, of course, having the necessary skills is really, really important. Yeah. And if you're really determined to do it, I'm not saying take on 10 projects, assist in some of the projects that the department heads need to do. Yeah.
Okay, how's your career and personal life evolved since moving into clinical research?
Well, I think it's been quite a journey, right? Um, it's been a transformative experience for me transitioning into clinical research. And career wise, I've actually gained a really deep appreciation for the complicated process of bringing new therapies to patients, right? There have been multiple challenges, but these challenges and rewards of contributing to medical advancements, I would say, are incredibly fulfilling. I've had the opportunity to develop my soft skills in negotiation and also stakeholder engagement, which actually is a work in progress, yeah. But I think many doctors actually have really good skill sets in negotiation. We do it all the time in clinical work, isn't it? Right? Um, Overall, I think I'm incredibly grateful for being on this path and for where I am now. It's been a steep learning curve, lah, to be honest. But I think to be the sense of purpose and opportunities that I have, I'm very thankful for. Yeah, and it's been really rewarding.
What are your future aspirations for this field?
So in a sense, I look forward to continue learning from every single trial that we do, getting a sense of the nuances in different types of clinical trials. Because obviously, an oncology trial would be very different from a cardiology trial. And of course, I also look forward to further career growth. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Mindy, for sharing such a very it felt like a very heartfelt sharing moment from you. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
No, I don't think there's anything to add on. Yeah.
How can they connect with you to learn more about your work?
So I'm quite shy on social media, but I do have LinkedIn. So I would really enjoy it if they could add me on LinkedIn. Yep.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Mindy. Now that wraps up another episode of Postcall Beyond the White Coat. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Mindy and found it as inspiring as I did. Remember, there is always more to being a doctor than behind the hospital walls. Now, if you're a doctor who's ready to impact healthcare differently, join us at Disruptive Doctors, follow us on social media, subscribe to our podcast, and don't forget to leave a review. Your feedback will help us bring more stories of doctors who are changing the game. Now, stay tuned for the next episode where we'll continue to explore how doctors like you are making a difference beyond the white coat. Until then, I'm Dr. Selena from Disruptive Doctors. Take care and keep disrupting the norm.
Thanks. See you.